Being that it's the middle of October right now, spooky season is officially here, and like many others during this time of the year, I do like to indulge myself in that atmosphere a bit. A good old classic ghost story is always a great way to set the mood right, and what better way to experience it than through the form of a video game. To take things a little more specific than just ghosts in general, for whatever reason, the concept of ghost ships has always been an incredibly popular trope in JRPGs. I mean, to be fair, this has been a pretty common thing in a lot of works of fictions, but JRPGs in particular have really seemed to attach themselves to it and run with it over the years. So with that said, we thought it'd be fun to rank the top 10 best ghost ships the JRPG genre has blessed us with. Not gonna lie, nostalgia will play a bit of a factor here, but even still, I think a lot of people will agree with some of my top choices. Either way, let's get this thing started. To start this list off, coming in at number 10, we have the ghost ship from Dragon Quest III. Now on a more objective level, this ship really doesn't have a lot to offer compared to a lot of the other ships on this list, but the reason why it ranks where it does is because to my knowledge, it is the first JRPG to feature a ghost ship. I guess I'm not 100% sure, so if that's not the case, please do leave a comment calling me out, but based on what year this game came out, I just can't imagine another JRPG featuring a ghost ship before this. Anyway, in order to board the ship, you need to acquire the Sailor's Thigh Bone, which has since been changed to the Boatman's Bone in more recent versions of the game. Once aboard, you meet the ghost of this dead dude named Eric and have to find the locket of him and his lover Olivia, which is an essential key item in advancing the story. Besides that, there's some items to find, enemies to battle and shit, and yeah, I don't know, like I kinda mentioned earlier, there's really not a whole lot going on here. I mean, I think the whole thing is only like 2 screens, but it's here for what it started, not necessarily what it did. Next on the list at number 9, we have Erebus' ghost ship from Rogue Galaxy. Talk about opposite ends of the spectrum here. I mean, we're going from 2 screens to 100 floors. This ship is perhaps the most unique one on this list as it only appears after you've already beaten the main story. When you finally do get to board it though, you're greeted by this creepy-ass butler who says you've been chosen as the heirs to Erebus' treasure, so to have at it. Yeah, pretty sketchy for sure, but of course your party goes along with it anyway. While traversing through it, you come across another adventure, and without spoiling anything, let's just say he has quite the important connection to a character you know pretty well. In addition to battling more typical type of undead enemies, you also get transported to fight against some previous bosses that you had beaten before in the game already. It's kinda like retesting all of your abilities and everything you've learned up until this point. After you've cleared the whole ship and beaten the boss that waits at the end for the first time, you unlock the Ghost Ship Extreme, which is basically 100 floors of the same thing and what I was referring to earlier. As one could guess, it can get pretty tedious, but for those wishing to experience everything the game has to offer, it does reward you with some extra goodies if you're daunting enough to take on the formidable task. Or as Billy Butcher would say, if you think you've got the bullocks. Sorry, I've been watching a lot of The Boys recently, if you couldn't tell. Shitty impersonations aside, coming in at number 8, we have the pirate ship Vesperia from Ys 8. I believe this is the newest addition to the JRPG ghost ship trope, and it's not a bad one. When it comes to the ghost ship aesthetic, this one is pretty much as stereotypical as it gets. I mean, there's skeleton pirates, logs of the dead captain to find that detail his past and last days, and of course, a pretty creepy boss to fight when you get to the end of it. Upon defeating the boss, you're gifted with the sea chart of the surrounding area, which once belonged to the now deceased captain, whose ghost you then do get to talk to. So yeah, pretty classic ghost ship through and through. It hits most of the typical notes, which isn't really a bad thing necessarily, as sometimes that's all you need. Coming in at number 7, we have both the ghost ship from the original Seiken Densetsu 3 and its newer remake, Trials of Mana. I know they're technically the same ship, but I'm pointing them out individually because one's in 2D and one's in 3D, so the vibe is completely different. I think it depends on which version you played first that determines which one you prefer, so I wanted to include both. Similar to Ys 8, this one's pretty generic as far as ghost ships go, but that doesn't make it a bad thing at all. It nails the vibe pretty well with all the undead enemies to fight, the ominous music, the dim lighting, and the big ghost boss at the end. There's really no gimmicks either, as it's a pretty straightforward dungeon. It just does a good job at capturing that spooky ghost ship atmosphere and shows that not everything has to be super innovative as long as it's executed well and made fun. In number 6, we have the ghost ship from Wild Arms. Another example that absolutely nails the ghost ship aesthetic even better than the last one, obviously given its place on the list. The music has an eerie tone to it that sets the mood well, and the game's graphical style really does it a lot of favors here, I think. When you arrive at this part of the game, it's been keeping other ships at bay, so Captain Bartholomew asks you to investigate and take care of it in exchange for access to his own ship, the Sweet Candy. So yeah, getting your own ship out of this is plenty incentive enough for your party to check this thing out and take on the undead pirate boss, Captain Geist. This was one of my first encounters with the ghost ship in a JRPG, so I too have a bit of nostalgia at play here, but even still, it's a classic take on the trope that was done pretty well. Coming in at number 5, we have the Phantom ship from The Legend of Dragoon. This game's version of a ghost ship is pretty special and memorable for a variety of reasons. For one, when it first appears, a pretty creepy and foreboding FMV plays, making its presence known. 2, instead of random battles like the rest of this game has, this ship has visible enemies through the form of blue wandering flames that you have to touch in order to trigger combat. And 3, an even cooler and longer FMV plays at the end of the segment that is easily one of the coolest in the whole game. Through a flashback of Rose, you see some really interesting history on Dragoons in the Dragon campaign that I won't get into for spoilers. And yes, spoilers are still valid on a 20-year-old game. All in all, the genuinely creepy atmosphere combined with the important plot details surrounding this segment make this location in Disc 2 a standout in the game and one of the most memorable ghost ships in JRPGs. In number 4 on our list, we have the ghost ship Atherum from Tales of Vesperia. One thing the Tales series does particularly well is the interaction between characters, in large part thanks to what the games call skits. It makes each location feel that much more immersive as you actually get to hear how your party would react amongst each other to the setting and situation. So naturally, the ghost ship section in this game is no exception to the immersion factor. I mean, you got some characters acting scared and shit, other characters making fun of those characters, and yada yada. It's nothing super original, but like I said earlier, it just helps the scene feel a little more alive. Anyway, when you first arrive to the ship, you're forced to split your party in half and control each group individually for a segment, and so they later reunite before the boss battle, which of course is another undead skeleton pirate. Right before that though, you come across a dead pirate's remains and his journal which details his plans to deliver something called a clear CL crystal to a place called Jormungand in order to drive away the monsters there. And wouldn't you know it, there's even an excerpt about his lover who we unfortunately never got to see again. We've never seen that before or anything. It goes without saying, your party feels inclined to take the task of a 1,000-year-old dead dude upon themselves and deliver the clear CL crystal to a place that logically shouldn't exist anymore, but does anyway. So yeah, I rambled on about this one long enough now, but as you can see, it's a pretty good one. Taking the number 3 spot, we have the SS Invincible from Chrono Cross. So this one pulls the old bamboozle on you.
You got bamboozled.
You hear rumors about a ghost ship, so you go check it out and find out it's not really a ghost ship, but just a crew disguising as a ghost ship to keep others at bay, only for ghosts to then actually come to the ship. It's a classic reverse red herring. Before this happens though, you meet the captain of the ship, who later becomes a party member by the way, and for some reason he wants to test your strength through a few series of fights. Eventually you fight the Captain Fargo himself, and while you do win the fight, you lose the war as he poisons you right after and locks you up. And that's of course when all the spooky shit starts happening as well. Ghosts start taking over the ship and attacking the crewmates, which makes a convenient distraction for your party to make its escape. On the way out, there's even a new character to recruit if you unlocked it from its cage earlier in the game, which actually is one of the most unique characters in the game, considering it can evolve into different forms based on some certain factors. When you finally make it to the top, to no one's surprise, there's yet another big bad ghost boss waiting for you. All in all, I thought this was a cool segment in the game, and with how many times I've ever played Chrono Cross over the years, I've become quite familiar with it, you could say. Alright, coming in at number 2, we have the Sunken Ship from Super Mario RPG Legend of the 7 Stars. Now, this was the first ghost ship I ever saw in a JRPG, and it just so happens it's one of the most memorable ones out there. There's a lot of puzzles here, with some of them genuinely being pretty tough and stumping me the first time around. Granted, I was a stupid little kid back then, but still. I mean, I remember being stuck at the password part forever. Well, at least until my dad finally decided to help out my undeveloped brain and just do it for me. And maybe this is just my memory here, but I also remember this part of the game having a really tough difficulty spike that could really kick your ass if you weren't prepared for it. Both King Calamari and the pirate captain Jonathan Jones can pose a threat, especially Johnny Jones if you end up having to fight him one-on-one with Mario by taking out all of his underlings earlier. If you don't take them all out though, you fight him with the full party instead, and obviously, he's much easier then. Upon defeating the two bosses and completing one of the longest dungeons in the whole game, you're rewarded handsomely with one of the legendary 7 stars in which the game is titled after. All of these factors, combined with the fact that Johnny Jones is just a cool and charming character to have on screen, make this one of the most impressionable ghost ships in JRPGs. Before we get to the top spot, I wanted to quickly go over some honorable mentions first that didn't quite make the cut due to one reason or another. The first honorable mention is the ghost ship from Xenogears. While this ship is genuinely creepy, especially with the part that has blood coming out of the shower, it didn't really feel like a traditional ghost ship despite being called a ghost ship. Even though I think Xenogears is one of the best RPGs ever, this part of the game didn't really stand out to me, to be honest. Next honorable mention is the fog ship from Suikoden 4. So this is a side quest that leads to recruiting one of the strongest characters in the game, who's actually a character from the first Suikoden game. The plot details surrounding Ted and the True Rune, the Soul Eater, is actually really interesting. Unfortunately though, the interior of the ship is just long dark paths, so I don't feel it deserves a spot on this list, as the ghost ship vibe is non-existent. Next is the ghost ship from Golden Sun. Yeah, this is just one screen, so I can't include it on the actual list, but it is home to the optional boss Deadbeard, which is the hardest boss in the game. The last honorable mention is the Phantom Train from Final Fantasy VI. So if this was an actual ghost ship, it would easily be a top 3 spot, but considering it's a train instead, unfortunately, I had to count it out on a technicality. In my personal opinion though, it features the most emotional moment in the entire game. Near the end of the segment, you see Cyan's own wife and child board the train, which means they've died, become ghosts, and are departing for the afterlife. Cyan's reaction is pretty heartbreaking, and even more so made by the fact that you can't even talk to him to advance the story. You just simply have to wait around for him to finish grieving, then the game decides when it's ready to move on. Much like life itself. I played this game 15 years after its release, and this was the moment that made me stop and think, damn, I get all the praise behind Final Fantasy VI now. I mean, it wasn't necessarily uncommon to see some adults die in RPGs back then, but you never saw kids die. Final Fantasy VI truly was groundbreaking. Anyway, to end this part on a lighter note, Sabin suplexing the train was cool as shit too. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for. Taking the top spot for the best ghost ship in JRPGs, we have the ghost ship from Grandia. A standout and super memorable part of the game, the setting and atmosphere of this ghost ship is unmatched. It comes along really early in the game and is right after Fina joined your group, who was Justin's love interest, so in a way, it feels like your first actual adventure. After sneaking on board a ship going to another continent in order to explore the world, your party comes into view of a ghost ship through the form of a quick cinematic cutscene. The crewmates and captain, who seemed all tough and manly before, are now acting super scared and want nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, 14-year-old Justin is all like, yo, I got this fam. He sees it as a test of courage, so he wants to take it on head first and into his own hands. Speaking of taking things into his own hands, in classic anime trope fashion, let's just say adventure isn't the only thing he gets a handful of, if you catch what I'm saying. Wait, I just realized I mentioned a second ago Justin was only 14 years old, and after a quick Google search I see Fina's only 15, and shit, this just got a little weird. Anyway, ignoring that, it's a fun ghost ship all in all, complete with another giant squid, kraken-like tentacle boss at the end. Apparently it killed the previous crew on the ship and is what led to it becoming a ghost ship in the first place, so yeah, it's a pretty tough boss for early on. The sense of adventure this part of the game gives off is just really awesome and makes you feel like you're a younger kid, exploring the mysteries and perils of a haunting ghost ship. And that is why I think it's the best ghost ship in JRPGs. And that marks the end of this video. Thank you to everyone who stayed until the end. We hope you enjoyed it. If we missed some of your favorite ghost ships, leave a comment with them below so we can be sure to check them out if we haven't already. Also, it would mean the world to us if you could like this video, and even better, hit that subscribe button so we can keep on doing what we love and putting out videos consistently. If you want to take your support a step further, you can donate to us on Patreon or follow us on Instagram. Links below in the description. Anyway, this is Gaming Productions, guys. Until next time.